Do you feel that in a time when we are more connected than ever, we are drifting away from real human connections, especially to ourselves? I do. Hi, I'm Leticia Latino, and I want to invite you to join me and my very inspiring guests in exploring ways to reconnect to your essence, to your definite purpose, to what makes you tick. Are you ready? Hello and welcome to a brand new episode for Back to Basics, Reconnecting to the Essence of You. I'm honored to have Choi on the show today, who besides being a very old friend of mine, we used to work together 20 years ago, he's a well-rounded technical sales and marketing executive, and I consider him one of those people that are like bridge builders, connection makers. His focus since I met him has always been connecting people with resources and each other. So it's no surprise that he actually discovered my podcast. I didn't think I should have thought about this before, but Chang, you discovered the podcast and we started chatting and I said, you should come on. So hello.
Hey, Letty, this is awesome to be on the podcast. I'm honored to be a guest also.
I'm very, very excited. I just told you before we started to tape that your voice sounds great, so I'm going to give you kudos for that. Anybody that does podcasting is thinking about voices, you know. So, but I appreciate it, Chang. You're someone that I know is a very high quality individual with so many experiences that are interesting both professionally and personally. So I'm very excited to hear about your journey all over again and learn about who was Chang as a child and how your journey be. So why don't you take us there from the very beginning?
Sure. Happy to do it, and I will try not to be too verbose because I like to tell a lot of stories, and I think I got a lot of that from my father and also my grandmother. But I was born and raised in Chicago, primarily in the Chicago suburb of Glenview. I'm very grateful to have been born there. Pretty much had everything that I needed and wanted. I mean, I could say I grew up pretty much a privileged life in terms of having everything that I've needed and wanted to do. My parents met in the United States. They're both from Korea originally. My father came over in 1959, and my mother came over via Canada like in the 60s, and they had met kind of set up in the Chicago area. But both of them, they lived through the Korean War, which was a war that happened in the 50s, but really the struggle for them started probably their whole lives since the end of World War II in 1945. So my dad he's still alive. My mother passed away, but my father is 84 years old. And so much of my upbringing was night and day compared to my parents' upbringing because they grew up through war, didn't have everything that they needed, struggled in this country to have everything that they had. And, I grew up in a house, and I grew up in the suburbs, had a bike, had, I played ice hockey, I played baseball, I played everything it had going for me. And I think that was probably good, but also at times you don't realize how grateful you are till you get older, right?
Absolutely. Well, you probably appreciate more, and I'm happy that you're sharing that in terms of your parents and their background, because I think that some of our parents, and I've had guests on the show that have had that upbringing that it's so difficult. They really strive to try to make their kids' life as easy as possible. Did you feel that growing up?
As a parent now, maybe not necessarily easy, but not have as many of the struggles that they have, right? Of just having enough to eat, and having enough to survive, but then at the same time balancing of not spoiling your children, right? And so I think the work hard ethic was pretty important. It was school. Academics is very important in my family. So I think a lot of it was stressed on, getting good grades, but no matter what, you still have to have school first, even though you're, playing all these activities and whatnot. But one of the mottos that my father always said was that, I didn't have all this growing up because his hometown is where is now North Korea. So they had to move after World War II ended because essentially his family had some land and they were being utilized by the Japanese because the Japanese occupied Korea from 1905 to 1945. And they were pretty much going to get run over by the communists coming in, or the Korean nationalists that would go in and call people with land and money essentially loyalists to the Japanese. And, it was chaos. So I've heard the story from many other people whose families are from what's now North Korea. They had to flee as far as possible. So he always said that, you have to be better than me, right? And you do basic measurements. Like, I only have a bachelor's degree. You guys need to, set higher dreams and further, because you have everything that you need, and I didn't have everything I needed. So that was always kind of the measure of success, not of living up to what parents said, because my father was a successful businessman. He worked at a small electronics company and did well for himself. I mean, he traveled a ton. I guess I kind of got that urge to travel from, seeing his pictures at the Coliseum and in Rome, and going to Mexico City, going to Barcelona, going everywhere else. And he always said, "You still have to be better than me." And in fact, I think I worked a couple summers at his company just helping out. And he's like, "Yeah, I don't think you really want to work here," because he was never an owner there or whatnot. He was just like a vice president. And he inspired me to work somewhere where he can grow a lot more. And it's kind of funny was that he only worked for one company, some 30 plus years, and then he retired. And then myself, and the reality of the world right now is that most of the companies I work for don't even exist, because they either got bought out or startups and they stop.
Yeah, definitely it's a change in that respect. That's a good point.
It's definitely different. And I remember I sometimes joke about this, is when you make metaphors about people that are serious at work. It's like, oh, they look like they're bringing their briefcase to work. And I remember my dad's briefcase coming in and out of home all the time. It's like, what's he carrying there? Now it's like, we have everything on our, not even laptops and our smartphones, that we don't need to bring briefcases. Don't wear ties and suits.
True. True. Although some of the lawyers listening to this might not be. I see them with the carry-on sometimes, leaving my office because they have so many paperwork. But yeah, no, that's funny. It's changed, absolutely. And so growing up, what were you interested? I mean, obviously you had a very rich background, and I think that work hard ethic that you have and that I think I have comes from that, having parents that really started from zero and had to leave their country and had to start from scratch. And then what were the things you enjoyed to do? Like, where you were a kid, were you envisioning yourself being something in particular? You share you like travel, so that's already something that you had identified.
Yeah, I think eventually I figured out what I wanted to do when I was 19 years old. But when I was a kid, I loved playing baseball. I was out in the backyard playing all the time. I was voracious for information. So the newspaper, I would just look at statistics and try and memorize statistics and whatnot. So I loved kind of data. And now it's even crazier now, because one of my sons looks at the National Hockey League app, and he's looking up statistics from like 50, 60 years ago. So
oh, wow.
I think I was voracious thing about learning facts. I think I always loved Jeopardy, and I loved watching like Wheel of Fortune, solving types of problems. Sports, I loved baseball, and then played hockey also. But then when I was 12 or 13 years old, the Chicago Bulls drafted Michael Jordan, and everybody wanted to be a basketball player. Okay. So it was really amazing, just because he sometimes you see him driving around, and obviously you see him on TV all the time. So sports was really huge. I really wanted to do music, but it wasn't interesting to me until probably middle school. My sister, who's older, she was 2 years older. She took piano lessons for like 10 years, and she had this really strict teacher. And I tried taking guitar lessons, and it was like, I didn't really want to practice. I just want to have fun and play with it. And as I look at the way music now, which is a huge part of my life, is that I still play today a couple of times a week, multiple performance groups, whether at church or with groups. And my sister, she won't even take her piano. She actually sold it. She doesn't want to play. I've invited her to play in groups. And I realized that music could be two different things for people. For me, music was about getting in touch with improvisation, curiosity, music, harmony, working with other people in groups. And for my sister, it was working hard at something that's very hard to be able to accomplish something. And I see that in her day-to-day now, because she went on to get a PhD in computer science, something that's not very easy to do. Mm-hmm. And then when she does activities, she will do something to the max extreme. Like when she got out of school, she was working at a national lab out in New Mexico, And she's like, "Oh, I got an activity I'm working on. It's boxing." So she started boxing, and then she eventually went to do a Golden Gloves boxing fight, which was, I think, just crazy. And then she eventually realized that wasn't for her, stopped. And then now I got her into playing ice hockey about 10 years or 15 years ago, and she plays like 4 times a week because she doesn't have any kids, and her and her husband are into these hobbies. So, like,
Well,
music, I think, was such an important thing in our lives because it taught you a couple things. You either get in touch with your kind of spiritual side, and the other side was the discipline side. And I appreciate it for both because it's just a wonderful part of my own life.
that's awesome. You made me think of something that when you don't have expectations, you probably approach music as I don't have expectations about this. So you could, improvise and be curious about it. Maybe she was like, no, I know what this should sound and how I should play this piece. And when you don't allow improvisation, it's a whole different thing because that's me. I took 7 years of piano and I've always loved music and I played the guitar in school. So I
Hmm.
could come up, I used to write my own songs.
Oh, wow.
And everything got messed up when I decided to take formal piano lessons. And then I took all these piano lessons and I could read and I could play, but I would put in so much stress into playing it right that,
Hmm.
my husband Don, who is a professional musician, he said, "You're doing this wrong. You have to let the hands flow."
Hmm.
But it was too late. To me, it was after 7 years, I was so frustrated that I barely
Hmm.
have touched my piano.
Ah, well, there's so many more musical journeys. I'm looking up at my office here. I've got a mandolin, ukulele, and a classical guitar. And my closet, I've got 3 electric guitars and a bass. And
Oh
it's
my
just,
God.
I just get into some fun feelings. The next thing I think I need to get is a banjo. I've got a, it's kind of a slide guitar, but the ukulele, it's really interesting. The ukulele is one of the most interesting instruments because it's so simple. It's only 2 octaves. Yet the journey of it, where it came from, I've discovered it in Hawaii, right? I'm
Hmm.
on the West Coast in Seattle, and people go to Hawaii for the weekend. It's really close to us. And I started listening to it, and then I looked at some of the chords, and now it's just kind of similar to guitar, but a couple, only fewer strings or whatnot. And I started following some YouTubers and then reading about the ukulele. It's originally from Portugal, because the Portuguese from Madeira, they invented this, and this is the way they entertained themselves. And the ukulele is also the cavaquinho in Brazil. And just for this small instrument with 2 octaves, you can see some incredible virtuosos, like Jake Shimabukuro or Aldrin Guerrero that play classical to incredible rock songs. So I look at that, and the biggest regret I have is not discovering the ukulele any sooner because I started playing about 10 years ago, and if I need to feel better about myself, I just pick it up and strum a few chords.
Ah, I love that. And I love what you say that there's so many musical journeys. So you have a list basically standing by of instruments you're going to tackle on.
Yeah, the mandolin, the way I got it, actually, I bought my first mandolin in Florida. I was on a trip up to Disney with our friends, mutual friends, and then there happened to be a guitar store. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get a mandolin. The reason I got it was because my father, who my sister and I into music, he said he was terrible at music, but he loved music. He had classical records, all the show tunes from, that were very popular in the 60s and 70s and whatnot. And he said that his uncle had told him that, you're not good at music, but so no, maybe you don't try the violin or the piano, which is for a little more sophisticated, harder, but try the mandolin. It's a little bit easier. And I'd heard the story of other friends. I think a friend of mine from Venezuela, she said that, oh yeah, I grew up playing the mandolin. And I started thinking about the mandolin, how it is in many different places. And then I eventually picked it up. I started playing in a Brazilian group and then realized that Jacob de Bandolim was one of the greatest mandolin players was from Brazil. And there's so much choro music that has got the mandolin there that that I just realized that it's these musical instruments go on crazy journeys themselves. Bluegrass obviously is really big too. So I'm a lot about the journey, kind of a little bit of a hacky music ethnologist, especially around stringed instruments and guitars. I mean, I look at where I live in Seattle compared to where I live in Chicago and then other places I lived in the U.S. And I look at the guitar and the sounds of it, and sometimes compare the sounds of the guitar from the blues and the Delta, a little more acoustic, and you start hearing more electric sounds in Chicago. And then when Seattle started booming in the 60s and 70s, Jimi Hendrix, to then some of the guys like Pearl Jam, Kurt Cobain, and Soundgarden, their guitars sound like Seattle because they sound like supersonic jets, which were big from Boeing. And then Kurt Cobain's hometown is it's Longview, which is a timber town, and Soundgarden, they sound like kind of timber mills and chainsaws versus electric factories and all. So I'm very, I guess, observant and extremely curious when things in my mind are triggered by sound or sight or words, and I try and dig in and discover a little bit more, just to understand a lot more of the why or reasoning behind certain things that I observe.
Wow, I love that. Definitely curiosity is one thing that all my guests have in common. And I guess that's probably when they tell me, what do I need to do to to be on your podcast? And I guess I should start saying that. Be curious about things, because then we have a lot to talk about. I know you also have a special attachment to Brazil or to the Portuguese language. How did that come about?
It happened really out of luck. I went to the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign, which is a pretty big state school, a couple hours south of Chicago. And it's kind of a farming community, but it's very international because there's a lot of agricultural ties and engineering ties to it. And when I was studying in college, my sister, she had studied Russian, and then she one summer went to Siberia, of all places, Irkutsk, and she had a great experience. I'm like, I want to go study somewhere. And I'd taken about 6 years of Spanish through high school, but I didn't take any in college, so I didn't fit the requirement to go to Spanish-speaking countries. So there was a program that I could study, a semester of Portuguese, and then live in the family and go to school in Brazil for the summer. So I decided to take it. And kind of similar to what you said before, is I really didn't have any expectations because I knew Brazil had beaches, music, and soccer, which I love playing soccer too. And I just went. I really lucked out with having a great host family. To this day, still I'm in contact with them. They've come and stayed with me to take English classes, and have gone back numerous times. And there's a lot of commonalities with Brazil that I found out. I think it's whether it's fate or serendipity, but when I got to Brazil, I was told, your birthday is actually the Independence Day of Brazil. So my birthday, September 7th, is actually like the July 4th of Brazil.
Oh. So
that kind of popped up to, other serendipitous types of things. Like my sister, I took her there around the country when we were in college, and she was born on November 15th, which happens to be the Day of the Republic. So both of us have like very important dates in Brazil.
That's so interesting.
It is. There's actually quite a bit more. I mean, I'm still involved with the Brazilian community out here in Seattle, of all places, where we've got a really small but strong Brazilian community. But I just believe that, there's angels or people out there that really pointed me in that direction. Myself, I think it helped it with my identity in a sense, because growing up in the States, I was Korean American. We had a handful of other Korean Americans, but I grew up in a predominantly Jewish and then Caucasian area, and that a lot of people of different colors. But you always wanted to fit in. So although I spoke Korean at home with my grandmother, my parents, we spoke English, and we go to church, we rejected a lot of that because it was like we wanted to be American. We wanted to, fit in or whatnot. But then when I went to Brazil, it was the last thing people thought of who I was. People on the street would look at me and start speaking to me Portuguese or call me Japonese, because there's, over 1 billion Japanese from Sao Paulo. So that was the first thing that people thought I was from Sao Paulo. And after a while, I have to explain yourself and about, no, I'm actually American and my family's Korean. You have to learn how to say it in Portuguese all the time. And then they want to learn more about me. So then I keep retelling my story and realize that, my face is the first thing that people are going to notice about me. And after going there probably for a couple times, I realized, my grandfather in Korea I've only met once. And when I was younger, I better go back before he passes away. So I went back actually to Korea in 1994, which kind of was a great trip for me to realize that I have a Korean identity that, in talking about back to basics, is a lot more about me and my nature than as much as I wanted to. Because, the environment that I grew up in was really American, but naturally I've got a lot of Korean values and roots that, I don't even realize.
That's so powerful what you're saying. And there's something that kind of forces you to reject it subconsciously. I don't know if you feel the same.
Yes.
Even the other day, I thought, I've been in Miami now 23 years. It has been a city that I have always loved, even before I lived here. But at the same time, if I find myself speaking about Miami, like sometimes I have to say I don't honor it enough. Like maybe I say I talk more about the bad than about the good, which is strange because I'm normally the opposite. I speak more about positive than negative. And I realized the other day that probably because Miami represents the fact that I don't live home anymore and that I left my country and that I don't go that often, So I kind of the other day had that strange realization, like you have to come to terms that you like Miami and that you feel part of it.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. And as I had children, I have twin boys actually. They're 12 now.
Oh boy!
I started thinking about nature versus nurture. And there's extremely interesting documentaries, and whenever there's an article in National Geographic about twins, I'm always reading about it. And there want to be an argument that by nature you're going to be exactly the same, and by nurture or nurture you're going to be different or whatnot. But it comes down to a lot of conclusions that it's a combination of your environment and also it's kind of your natural being of tastes and preferences. So kind of my back to basics story, which I started discovering and was a bit ashamed of growing up was, my full name is actually Chang Choi, and my parents never gave me an American name. Most of my colleagues, my other fellow Korean Americans, they always got American names, but my father kind of said, well, we thought about giving your sister an American name, but never did it. And then he decided just to keep our names Korean by actually honoring his father, my grandfather, the opportunity to name us, because my grandfather actually was a bit estranged from my father. They grew up in a different time. I mean, it's only 2 generations ago, but my grandfather and his brothers who had land up in what was North Korea, they had concubines, so they had like probably 2 to 3 wives. And then during the whole craziness of the Korean War, when they went down to the southern part of the peninsula, my grandfather kind of abandoned my father and my grandmother and sister, or my aunt and all. So my father was a bit angry at my grandfather for a lot of his life. I think eventually he forgave him, but that was the one thing that he said that he'd allow my grandfather to have is the ability to name his kids. So that was what my grandfather gave me, and my name actually in Korean means prosperity through learning.
I like that.
Yeah, I was embarrassed about it when people would ask me, "What does your name mean?" Like my sister's name was like Beautiful Sunrise or something, right? The girls get the pretty names. All the guys have to have something brave or whatever. Mine's a little more philosophical, and I've embraced it to realize that, yeah, I really am a voracious kind of learner and curious person. So that's what I think really is kind of towards my nature versus nurture is my, what's the definition of my name is prosperity through learning. And prosperity can mean different things, whether it's obviously financial wealth to experience types of things. And for me, I mean, I haven't gone more than 5 or 6 hours without eating a meal. I know I always have the ability to survive, and as a human being, that I think the prosperity for me is a lot more of the life experiences and the human interactions in my life that make me more fulfilled.
Well, and you do sound like someone that keeps true to your sources of joy, because I love it when we are having an interview and we really haven't even gotten to like what is that you do for a living and what's your job. And I think so many people define who they are by their job or their title, or yes, I know you're a civil engineer, so I'll just throw it out there. But I also know that you work in many things, always on the technical side, and feel free to obviously say something about that. But I love the fact that you probably are one of the very, very few guests that I've had that, we've been talking for maybe 25 minutes and we haven't touched upon what is that you do for a living. I love that.
Yeah, I remember hearing early on when I started traveling when I was 19, and you'd run into I guess the first time I studied, I ran into these grad students who they call themselves ABD, and I didn't know what that was. It's all about dissertation. And some of them were 25, some were 30, some were 40 years old, that were professional travelers just finding grants to go everywhere. And you'd run across these people, or run across in Carnival in Brazil these really interesting people that came from other cultures, like some German guys that say, yeah, I'm a gardener in Germany. I work for 6 months in Germany and then make as much money as I can. Then I come and live here 6 months in Brazil. And I guess the term that I heard a lot was, I don't live to work. I work to live. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I think I do a bit of that, but obviously, with the modern challenges of putting your kids through school and whatnot, of being able to retire with the challenges of different expenses that do come up. I definitely do appreciate a challenging work lifestyle, and I have changed my career a few times. I did start as a civil engineer. Initially, actually, I studied computer science in college, just because my sister got into the prestigious school, and I'm like, yeah, I guess I'll apply there, and I got in. I did it for a year, and I realized that at the time we had to go to computer labs, basements of all these buildings, and I go, I don't want to just be debugging my program the whole time. I kind of want to deal with people, and also then I was going to go possibly do geography, and then the closest thing, I guess, because when I told my father I wanted to change my major to geography, kind of, you're never going to get a job here, right? And the tough Asian parent there. So I'm like, I found civil engineering because it could be very technical and, structural with some high math analytics and stuff. And then it could be very people focused with transportation, traffic planning, urban development and whatnot. So I was happy with the change. And I studied, 2 years afterwards, get my master's. And in that whole time when I studied abroad in Brazil, I wanted to work on big projects around the world, because I realized that not only if you're building infrastructure, but you're providing resources and helping the people around you there. So initially, my plan was taking grad classes in transportation. So I was researching all these different companies that were building mass transit systems, from light rail to subways or whatnot. And then I ended up working for a company that was big into power plants, which was extremely interesting. So I worked really in civil engineering and power plants for almost 5 years, a couple different companies. The first company, we were doing a lot of natural gas power plants in Argentina, and a couple in Brazil. I never traveled there, and that was one of the reasons why I moved to telecom, was that in these power plant type of construction companies, the civil engineer isn't usually the project manager. It's the mechanical, because it's the biggest part of the equipment and the plans. So I learned a lot about kind of natural gas that was booming in the middle late 90s, and worked a bit in hydropower and a little bit in nuclear power. So I still have a lot of interesting curiosity towards the power grid.
That's good that we're moving into a sustainable world. I think you have a lot to investigate there.
It's very curious, and just the side of, I guess, energy and climate change or whatnot is I feel almost that we are accustomed to living a comfortable life where we're born under man-made light and everything else. But if we really think about it, I mean, if we cut ourselves off, like people are cutting the cord for cable, but if you cut the cord to the electricity and other utilities that are in modern cities, there's quite a few people that wouldn't know how to. There's resources you can survive. Might not be the most economical, but you can get you can get energy from the sun. You can get energy from obviously some types of fuel. You can get energy from a lot of different sources. Even water off your roof and whatnot. So I'm always curious about these little types of hacks. And I'm a semi-serious camper, so I pay attention to a lot of camping technology, and I really have been attracted to these companies that are, I guess, either social entrepreneurs, or I forgot, but social enterprises, where you might buy one thing for you, and then they, like for example, a life straw. You buy a life straw that you can take camping in case you don't have run out of water. You can drink straight out of the stream, and then they'll provide that same thing to a developing country. BioLite is another company that's kind of curiosity to me. And there's several design companies out here in the Seattle area that are big into camping and surviving that I follow. So that's kind of another curiosity that I have, and I'm trying to do some little more, I guess, personal research and volunteer work in these organizations.
Well, it sounds to me like the list of instruments that you have. You have a list of interest also on the professional side, which is fantastic. And so it sounds to me you've lived a pretty balanced life. I'm sure, like in any musical composition or life, there's not only major chords. There are also the minor chords, and the combination of both are, in my opinion, what makes life interesting and beautiful. So, can you share any of those minor moments, the struggles, like any really hard to deal moment in your life, and how you overcame and how you stayed true to who you are and say, okay, this I'm grieving something, but I'm moving on.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm glad you got to that point, because I did think about a lot of what I wanted to share, because yeah, even though we can live as with everything that we need, from a resource point of view, of food, water, shelter, a lot of times emotionally and guess emotionally and spiritually, you don't necessarily have everything you need for whatever it's external or internal types of traumas or whatnot. So for myself, I think growing up privileged, within a 2-week span, when I was 13, both my mother and my grandmother passed away, and I was in 8th grade.
Oh,
And
wow.
so we had
That's
So
tough.
we had it was really tough, because it was unexpected, but kind of expected. My mother had been suffering from depression, and she was a nurse, so she had a very stressful job, along with her family had struggles. They all came to the U.S. and they all have been successful now, but there's a lot of wounds even today that some of my family members don't like to talk about. But she was obviously an integral part of my life. But the thing I realized probably many years later, probably most recently, is that your parents had lives before you were born, right? And they're human beings,
Of
and
course.
they continue to have that. So, I don't know all the history and all the details, but mental illness was the thing that she had to deal with quite a bit. And then I watch out for myself and my sister, because there's hereditary types of things with that. And then my grandmother was actually my father's mother. She had suffered quite a bit with growing up, and she had a hard life. But even today, I'll show my grandmother's picture to some family friends or household friends, and they'll start crying, saying how kind of a woman she was. So it's really nice when I can reminisce about that. But then they passed away within 2 weeks of each other. So my father essentially lost his mother and his wife within 2 weeks.
Wow, that is heavy. I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it was hard, and I think a lot of my family and cousins didn't think I really understood, because I was one of the younger cousins. I was 13 or whatnot, and some of my cousins really didn't even hear about it. I mean, they live in separate towns across the U.S., so they didn't really hear stuff. But the thing that I think I learned the most, and I'm realizing it as a parent today, was that how did we kind of deal with it? Is some people they close up, other people talk about the trauma or whatnot. But my father, who had gone through that with himself and also a lot of other trauma, he talked to my sister and myself. She was 2 years older, 15. She was in high school, and so he realized that we only have 2 more years of all 3 of us living together. So every night, about 9:50 at night, before we went to bed at 10, he'd bring us over, and we'd have a little Bible study, because he became much stronger in his faith.
Mm-hmm.
And we prayed, and my sister and I, we weren't big church proponents, and today I go, but I realized that what's more important than going to church is actually having faith.
Mm-hmm.
And that word, I guess I didn't come to terms with until a few years ago. But to me, faith has been always with me, but in different words. It's having a positive attitude that, hey, everything's going to be all right. And that's what I think I learned during that time. And I didn't really pray that much in my life until, I'd say, another trauma, which I think you might you can relate to this a bit too, is the end of 2000 when the telecom sector started imploding and the whole stock market crashed. Was we were working at Nortel at the time, and there's tons of people. It was great, but then I was seeing people getting laid off left and right. Friends on same floors, guys in cubes next to me and everything else. And that for one time in my life, I just could not eat. I was just feeling just awful about it, feeling helpless. And so I started to, kind of pray in the mornings, right when I got to work, just to, get it off my chest. And having that gave me a lot more of a positive attitude. And what kind of things that dealt with the layoffs there was that some of my team members that were either getting laid off or potentially would, I just started wanting to give them something tangible that they could go to the next job. So I started just writing letters of recommendations or referrals, and gave like 2 or 3 to all my team members, and that felt good, and I think they appreciated that.
Absolutely. Well, at the point, I didn't have anybody under me, but I always said, and I'm publishing a book very soon, and I speak about the Nortel, like what you just described. It's exactly what I wrote. It was very unsettling to see friends of yours, people were top talent, arrive to their cube and then being dragged out, and that's it. They're gone. That was very traumatic for me. And I didn't have a team at the time, but I did appreciate that the boss that I had at that time was so open. She was very outspoken, just exactly like you. Instead of hiding it, she said we have to brace for impact because we don't know when it's coming. We know it's coming. So, and how you tackle those kind of situations is very important, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm looking forward to reading your book. Books have been actually a huge part of my life recently. I set a goal this year to read 2 books a month because I just discovered reading books, I think, in my later part of life. Growing up, I was disencouraged, but I think actually I realized, going back to this whole nature versus nurture topic, was I did not have a propensity to read books very well. So I skimmed through books or read Cliff Notes when I was in elementary school and high school to get through things. But probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I took my kids to an eye doctor appointment, and I had my eyes checked also. And this one eye doctor happened to be very scientific. He had multiple degrees in eyes and was very much an eye type of nerd. So he was looking at our eyes and he was like asking all these questions. And he saw something in my one son's eye. He said the way his eye is shaped, he's going to have trouble focusing at reading distance. So his eyes are working 4 to 5 times harder than the normal eye. So, and my son at the time was having reading difficulty, and we realized that it was not because it was hard to read, it was just physiologically it was harder. So we worked with him on it, saying if you get tired, look at the wall far away, defocus. And he got into special reading, but one of the lessons I think we learned was that because naturally it didn't come easily to him, we told him this is going to be hard for you, you have to work at it. And now he's a great reader, and he also worked hard at it and learned how that you can overcome things if you really work hard. So during that period, I learned that the doctor said that my eyes were a little bit shaped like his too, and I realized that, man, that's why I didn't like reading, because I was falling asleep because I was so tired. So I realized that, okay, well, now I know it's not that I'm not a good reader, it's just that it's a little bit harder for me. So I've read in different mediums, from audiobooks to digital to, I still do like print books and all. So I will continue to read. And actually, one of the other Back to Basics ideas I thought about listening to your podcast was how do you continually improve your life? And one of the things I've been trying to do is making better habits. So a couple of habits that I've picked up on the last few years is that every morning when I wake up, I don't look at my smartphone or whatnot. I actually do 2 things. I stretch, do some yoga, and also I read my book before I check my smartphone or go downstairs.
Wow,
and,
that's great.
And it feels great because, the reading, sometimes you can be passively reading. Other times it gets your mind kind of, the neurons all firing. So I like that about the reading, because it's actually your mental stretching that you do. And I'm not a coffee drinker, even though I live in Seattle. But I found that I need less coffee because when the stretching of my spine gets all the neurons going, and then reading of a book stimulates my mind. So I believe it's better than coffee.
I love reading. That's one thing that I need to get back to basics. I'm reading something all the time, but I'm not reading at the speed I like because, it's so much going on, and I'm getting to bed too exhausted at night. But then what I push myself is to realize this is a stage. I have a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old. So it's also those times in my life where I tell my husband often, we are living at this is it. This is the maximum it will be required from us, I think, both professionally. We both have very demanding jobs, and at home. I think when we pass this peak, it will get a little better. And I already feel it, with not having babies anymore. I already feel that maybe I can read one chapter instead of half the book. But it's something that I leave them in my nightstand because I say, as a reminder, I want to read more. I'm doing more audiobooks, but I don't get the same satisfaction from it. So I'm still, engaged, but the whole reading or listening to the book is not the same as to having the book in my hands.
Do you read books in English, Spanish, or French, or all of them?
Yeah, all of them if the book is really appealing to me, but bizarrely enough, I feel almost more comfortable reading in English these days.
Okay.
Sometimes I will read something in Spanish and it will be like, oh, this feels easy. Why? Why is this book? And then I say, I'm reading in Spanish. It's like that. You forget nature, going back to your nature versus nurture. Sometimes something that is really natural for you have forgotten that is natural.
Now, do you speak Spanish to your kids? Because Don speaks Spanish too, right?
Yeah. We decided that we want to give them, we could give them bad Italian and bad Dutch. So we decided because we both can give them good Spanish, that's what we're going for. I think for them, the whole identity thing, because I relate to you that, I say I'm Venezuelan, but I always feel like, but I have to explain, but my family is Italian.
Yeah.
Because what I lived is not what my Venezuelan friends lived. It was different at home. My kids, I think they feel more American because we've been here for so long and we are a little bit Americanized ourselves that they feel more identified with who they are.
Yeah, it's really interesting. One of my favorite words is diaspora. I've learned that word because kind of my original journey to Brazil, it's like people think I'm Japanese here or whatnot, but on one of my outings with was my host cousin, we're walking through a neighborhood and I see my last name, Choi, Presentes, in this neighborhood in Recife, Brazil. So that we walk in and I meet Leonardo Choi. And it happens to be that his father was a Korean minister that moved there and their family started businesses. So I always am curious as to why people kind of look like you in certain areas. And I think one of the things I shared with you in our exchanges was that I recently funded a documentary called Geronimo, which is about the Korean diaspora in Cuba, which very few people know about. So
I know about it thanks to you. It was a great recommendation.
Yeah, so I love diaspora and where people are at because, as a civil engineer, I think about how did people get places. Going back to the ukulele, I have some Portuguese friends that they don't speak any Portuguese, but they're from the Northeast Rhode Island or big area, Cape Cod area where they ended up. And a friend of mine, he just kind of jokes and rolls his eyes. He's like, the Portuguese ended up in a lot of these places because they were on whaling ships and they were on all these long cross-sea journeys. They're like, enough, I'm not getting back on the boat. I'm staying here. So that's interesting, along with what they're talking about now is the Silk Road, which has brought so many cross religions and cross cultures across, China and Central Asia, which I think that part is a bit fascinating, which I've never been to, but I'd like to study a bit more because there's, I think I read a couple 100,000 Korean descendants in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. And then, of course, what you're talking in previous podcasts about Indonesia is that's kind of same way I think that like Islam came to Indonesia or whatnot. So those kind of routes and trade routes or whatnot are extremely interesting to see how the history and the diaspora of peoples have gone around the world.
That's fascinating. I feel that I need, and I say this with quality guests, which they are all quality, but you have so much wisdom and experiences that I feel I need two other episodes with you. One on specific subjects like, the Korean subject and just what you share about with the diaspora and all that. And but I want to keep this, focus in you. And I know and I appreciate the fact that you reach out and you said, I've discovered your podcast. I am enjoying it. So it means the world to me that we reconnected already through the podcast. And I keep saying this because you would be shocked by how many people give me advice on what should I do with the podcast, right? Oh, how many followers, how many downloads, how many, and then because you can do it and say, I'm doing this just for me. I'm not doing it for anything else. I'm just enjoying my conversations. And then I get an email like yours, and then it really makes my day, because something that I'm enjoying and I'm doing with no ulterior motive whatsoever, it's resonating with someone. And so it really means the world when you say, these are some back to basics ideas, or these are some, because then, we are really making a difference, even if it's a little one.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a constant journey of figuring out who you are and how you evolve as you go through. I'm turning 50 in 2 years, and I look back at my 20s, 30s, 40s, and I just hope that my brain capacity doesn't slow down, or obviously certain things I forget or whatnot. But there's so many things that are wonderful and curious, and I'm thankful to have met very interesting people like yourselves, along with having the opportunity to have these resources and communicate. And the language stuff I love to talk more about, because Portuguese I speak much better than Korean, and I can speak enough Spanish and all, but mathematically, because I do like kind of engineering and science, I would sometimes say to my kids and even to some other friends that is, how many people are in the world and how many people speak English. But if you add on the billions or billions of others, then if you think of percentage-wise, how many people or how many things you have in common with people if you speak the same language, even the same words of hello, goodbye. And it's something that I think that instead of wanting to be different, I strive to find commonality. And being, I guess, kind of an outsider, I always wanted to fit in or want to be accepted. It was pretty easy for me. I mean, it was like, I play sports. Yeah, we're playing in sports teams, or eat the same foods. Yeah, like McDonald's, like pizza, and you can have some conversations with it. But because of that, I think I was always paying attention a lot more in my friends' homes, in the streets, to other conversations, that I tried to find the same things I had in my house that I grew up with that were same with everyone else. So whether it's connecting people or just finding the same common denominators of things, it's really fascinating, because life is a lot more interesting if you can tell stories with each other and find commonality rather than differences.
Right, I love it, and that's one of the basics of the Buddhism and the Dalai Lama preaching. Which I'm Catholic, but that's one of the things that attracted me the most from reading the Dalai Lama books, was that it's like focus on finding the common ground. And it was so powerful when I read it, and really your perspective changes, because even when you're arguing with someone, if you strive to find the common, like why is she or he arguing about this, and then you say, oh, well, because he loves his son. Well, I love my son too, so now you really can relate.
Yeah.
So it's very powerful. So Chang, to close, I'm going to ask you, you share so many things that you enjoy that are sources of joy, as you say, for you. But let's say that you're going to have the last day on earth. This is a cliche question, but and you can only do one, and you want to do what makes you tick. What is it?
Wow. What makes you tick? I think I would probably like to have my family close by and around a big table enjoying a meal. And it'd be, I think about like a huge circular table with like a lazy Susan and stuff. Just everybody, I love circular tables because you can look at each other and everyone's equal. It'd be having a meal and sharing stories about each other and good things about each other. Because I think that my family, my sisters, a couple hours away, and families across the U.S. and even my host family, which I consider down in Brazil family, I'd like to probably share a big meal together with all the food that I like, and the food that I like would be as terrible as a Chicago style pizza or Chicago style hot dog to feijoada to naengmyeon, which is a cold noodle dish from North Korea, to other foods like I love kibi and acapuria, which are almost the same thing. All the fried types of pastelitos from the Caribbean. But yeah, sharing a meal and then talking about where all these types of foods come from, and
Well,
I think that would be probably what I'd like to do is having people together and enjoying good stories and good food.
yeah, so really connecting, which is how we started to in your introduction. You really enjoy the connection, which by the way would be my part of my answer too, just to feel connected to the ones I love and to the environment.
Yeah, that's great.
That's great, Chang. Well, this has been fantastic. I'd love to have you on the show. I know the audience will appreciate this conversation, and I definitely think it's not going to be the last one. So you have an open invitation, and we'll talk about some more of those amazing experiences you've had.
Thanks, I really appreciate it. It's been an honor being your guest.
Thank you, Chang. Take care.
Take care.